I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
We have Dan and Ross joining us for this segment. Tom, do you want to go ahead and do the honors?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do a quick intro here. Dan, Ross, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. And we're going to start off with Dan's encounter. It is not only fascinating, it's been featured in Witness of the Unknown. So it's a very interesting story. We're going to hear it firsthand from Dan. So I'm hand it off to you, and let's go from there.
Okay, this is Dan. Thanks for having me on. I'm not exactly sure which story it was. I have a couple from that area.
Oh, we want to hear them all.
Hear them all. Okay. Okay, so in 1971, I joined the Air Force, and I got stationed down at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which is right outside Tucson. And at the time, it was a SAC base, Strategic Air Command, so we had a couple of wings of B-52s on the base, and these 52s are on alert, and they're loaded up with nukes. And, of course, their job was to, given the command, to fly in and attack Russia. So I'm working, my MOS was law enforcement, and so I'm working out of the security police organization there, and I'm working a midnight shift. I'm new, and they put me with this guy, older Air Force guy. I think he was like a buck sergeant. So we go to work, and it's like midnight, and we receive a call to take some coffee out to the entry control point at the weapons storage area. So we go driving out there with coffee in hand. And to get there, you had to go down this little 2-lane road, and which was about a mile long. And on both sides were the mothballs for the aircraft. I forgot the exact acronym for it. They had hundreds of planes that were in mothballs. And the road itself, on both sides were cyclone fence.
Are you still there, Dan?
I think he disappeared.
All right.
Yeah, he did. He just dropped off. Let's bring him back.
Well, it happens sometimes. We were just talking about technology before we started this segment, and I
think I lost you there.
Yeah, we did.
Hey,
we were just talking about how technology kind of messes up.
It's a little strange. Sorry, I got allergies.
Oh, I can totally understand. So let's see, Tom, do you remember where he left off?
Yeah, Dan, you were just talking about the buffs or the B-52s that take off. What their mission statement is.
Yeah, so you didn't get the part about where we're driving to the weapons storage area. Okay. So I'm a new guy, and they put me with an older guy, and we get a call to get coffee and bring it out to the weapons storage area to the security guys at the front gate there. So to get there, you got to drive down this 2-lane road, small 2-lane road, which is about a mile long. On both sides, it's cyclone fencing with concertina wire. And you're like going down this funnel. And on both sides of this area are all the aircraft and mothballs. So we down without incident, get to the entry control point to the weapons storage area. This is where they stored all the nukes. Give them coffee, chat for a minute, turned around and we were driving back. We get about halfway up this road, mile-long road, and in our headlights, we see this thing sitting out in the middle of the road. My first thoughts was that it was a broken down car. And I think I remarked to the guy I was with that that's what I thought it was. And he affirmed that's what he thought it was. And as we grew closer to this thing, you can tell that it wasn't a car and we didn't know what it was. So we pulled up on it and stopped and got out, and we walk up, and here's an airplane engine sitting out in the middle of the road, one of these, a prop. It used to be a prop engine, minus the blades. And this thing's sitting out in the middle of the road. And I'd say it's probably almost the size of a Volkswagen, minus the blades. So, we're looking around, there's no drag marks. The only way to get this thing out into the middle of the road is to airlift it from the other side of the fence, over the 7-foot cyclone fence, and down on the road. So we call this in, and our flight chief, the boss, comes out, staff sergeant type, and we're looking this thing over, so he calls his boss. And over the course of maybe a half an hour, all these people start arriving. And we were told to get back in our car and stay there, which we did. Next thing we know is that they had gotten the base commander out of bed, and the base commander was out there. So he's looking at this thing, and no one apparently could figure out how it got there. And we're told to go back to operations, and the flight chief would meet us back there, so we did, and he told us basically to shut up about it. Not to say another word to anybody. So I don't think a Bigfoot lifted it over the fence. How it got there, I have no idea. Some sort of perhaps trickster. I think throughout history, they spoke of these things called tricksters and these little tricks they would play on humanity, and I think this was one of them.
Well, tell me a little bit about the tricksters, because I'm not familiar with that terminology.
I think most civilizations have oral stories or written stories of tricksters. These are paranormal type beings who enjoy playing tricks on people. And it's in almost every culture.
Okay. Now, you also did see, reading your story, I saw some witness accounts. Apparently, there was frequent, there was observations of a large hominid running around. It was very fast, which is exactly what these things, they move lickety-split.
I ended up reading that in a blog. I think the statement I made, I think Will put that up. And then somebody made a comment that they were a tech sergeant who was stationed out there right around the same time, and he was in the security police also, and he said he had never heard of anything like this before. And I remember reading this and thinking, you never heard of this before because none of the troops would want to tell you this.
Right.
This isn't something you're going to tell a tech sergeant. There's a lot of things. And my next story will kind of affirm the fact that there's things you don't want to say. There's reports you don't want to make. And this was one of them, I think. No one's going to say anything to this guy. Now, what they had back there, and I was told by two different guys, security types who worked the area, that they had a tall, large, bipedal entity that they observed running from telephone pole to telephone pole. And they would, their dogs, they had canine, the dogs would alert on it, although the dogs wanted nothing to do with it, and they would have to actually pull the dogs through the entry control point to get them into the area. So
I'm going to stop right there for a second. That's the part that I find interesting. How often do security dogs balk at what they're, what they've been trained to do?
And these aren't guard dogs. These are sentry dogs. And there's a difference. Sentry dogs are basically killers.
Okay. What do they do?
This is what they do. Once you turn a sentry dog loose on someone, they're used in Vietnam. And I'm sure throughout history they've been used off and on. But these were sentry dogs, and they wanted nothing to do with this area there, especially when this thing was observed or was known to be running about.
That's one of the things that No, I apologize. I was just making a quick comment. That's one of the things that I always find fascinating, and I'd love to talk to a animal behavioralist. How is it that a dog, especially a sentry dog, sounds like it's a four-legged seek and destroy missile?
Yeah.
Right? How is it that a dog like that can sense and smell something that's never smelled, probably never had contact before? What is it that, it's an unanswerable question at this point, but I just find it interesting. How do they know that this thing is bad news?
Well, and those dogs are highly trained too. They're not like other dogs. They're very disciplined, and we've talked a couple times about there were a couple of canine officers I talked to years ago who were in Texas, 2 units, one deputy, one dog each. They were heading to another town for whatever they were doing, and one of these creatures come racing out towards the highway, paralleled one of the vehicles, and the dogs just went crazy. And they said typically those dogs don't react unless they're told to give them a command to react.
Well, after boot camp in Texas, they tried to get us into the sentry dog training. They were looking for volunteers. And I love dogs, so I thought about doing it, and they gave us demonstrations. And if you went into it, it was, I think, about 6 weeks, you and your dog, that you trained together. Then it was an automatic ticket to Vietnam, and which I had no problem with. The problem I had was that once you went overseas, you would come back, but your dog wouldn't. So they would euthanize the dog, and I couldn't do something like that. So,
and the purpose was that because of what the dog was trained to do, and they just felt it could not be civilized after that.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that'd be a tough one.
Yeah. So.
All right, so back to these dogs.
Pardon?
Yeah, go. I apologize. I stepped on the conversation. I just said, yeah, so back to the story.
So, they would alert on this thing, but in at least one case, the dog had to be dragged into the area, and then it cowered the entire time, which is what they do around Bigfoot anyways, the majority of them. They get a whiff of a Bigfoot, and your most vicious dog turns into a panty waste. So these things have been around a number of bases, and my next base up at I got shipped overseas and came back and got stationed at Luke, which is right outside of about 15 miles west of Phoenix. Tactical Air Command, so they trained pilots from all over the world on the F-4 Phantom. So I got stationed there, and it's pretty funny what happened there because I ended up being desk sergeant at Security Police Operations. And I started receiving calls from civilians downtown Phoenix in the general area there. And the civilians would call me to report UFOs. So what would happen is that if they called during the day, then base information order would take the call, but after hours, those types of calls would get routed out to the security police desk, and we would have to field those calls, which basically informed the person calling that the Air Force no longer investigated UFOs. Project Blue Book was closed, and we would inform them to call the police department. In the majority of cases, they had already called the police department, and the police department informed them to call us, which I found pretty funny because all the books I had read on UFOs growing up, you saw this type of bureaucracy in action. So one night, I'm on the desk. It's 1, 2 in the morning. And I start getting these calls, one after the other, from civilians down in the Phoenix area that they're seeing UFOs over this mountain range outside of Luke, which is, I think it was called White Tanks Mountains. So getting call after call. So I'm talking with a bunch of guys there, and I find somebody to relieve me on the desk, and told these guys, let's go out to the flight line and, eyeball the white mountains and white tanks and see if we can see anything. So we ended up going out to the flight line area. Now, this was prior to 9/11, so you didn't have any fencing going around this base. It was just the base, the flight line, and you had open desert. And that was it. So we ended up parking out on the flight line. There was like 4 or 5 cars. We were each in a car. Shut off the engine, shut off the lights, and we're looking up towards the White Tanks Mountains. And the guy in the car to the right of me goes, "What in the hell is that?" And he pulls on his headlights, and we look out maybe 100 yards out into the desert area near the flight line. And here's this tall bipedal thing jogging. It wasn't a flat-out run, and it wasn't jogging slow. It was like in a medium run from left to right. So we start our engines up, and we'll all go tearing out there to where we last saw this thing, and it is gone. And we're like, what the F? There was no place for it to go. There's no holes. There's no, all you have is desert and tumbleweed. And this thing was gone. And we all saw it. So what it was, I have no idea.
Well, you guys had a clear view
of incident for you if you wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to get a little more detail if I can.
Sure.
So you saw this thing out in the desert.
Yeah.
It's running. It's bipedal.
Right.
And I'm going to make an assumption, but probably larger than an average man, right?
Right. Now, this wasn't a 9 or 10 footer, but it was large.
Okay. And they're kind of bulky, or was it more trim?
It was only for a second or two.
Okay.
From what I recall, it wasn't bulky.
Okay. And you didn't feel inclined to go chasing it?
We chased it out to where we had seen it last. And this is wide open desert out there. There's nowhere to hide, unless perhaps the thing just fell to the ground and flattened itself out. There was nowhere to hide. So, I remember reading some books by Jacques Vallée, and in one of the chapters, he describes the Edwards Air Force Base and how the security police out there were having the same problems with these tall bipedal entities.
Dan.
So I think they're, for some reason, that they have an interest in military installations.
I was going to tell you, too, that we have an ongoing situation going in that region I don't, Tom, what's it been going on since, I want to say August or September. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's two different areas. One near Tucson, the other one's west of there. I take that back, east of there. A number of miles over closer to the New Mexico border. And in both cases, I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of tracks, multiple individuals. Every time our guy there goes into the place, it's all fresh, evidence. So lots and lots of activity in that
What area
region.
is this, Will?
What
area?
One of the areas is near Tucson, and the other one is over near, I can't think offhand the name of the little town. It's near the New Mexico-Arizona border. It's in a region I never really expected to get that kind of material from, but just tons and tons of stuff coming in all the time.
Yeah. So there's no military installation in this area at all?
I'm not sure. I'll have to ask him. I'm not really that familiar with the area, but I'll send you some of the pictures that we're getting from there, of the tracks. I mean, they're, like I said, they're all fresh. Every time he goes in there, there are hundreds of fresh tracks, at least a half a dozen individuals. It's a really incredible situation that's going on.
Yeah.
Well, and he's also picking up not only the big ones, but infants, little ones.
Yeah, the tracks range from 3 inches up to 22 or up to 20 inches.
Wow, big boy.
And
Yeah,
people may say, "Well, gosh, those are just little kids out there," but the resemblance to human footprints is very superficial. These things go deep into them. Far deeper than even an adult would make in that area.
And to give you an example, I was a little curious about that myself because these are in river bottoms and there's water there and lots of greenery. So, I guess to preface that a little bit, there was a rancher in that same area over near the New Mexico-Arizona border who'd had a bunch of stuff going on with his cattle. So he put out a game camera by one of his water troughs. Now, typically Sasquatches will avoid those, but that's out in their environment. When it's on a person's property with, other human objects there, that's a whole different thing. That's, you're not in their backyard, so, and they're keenly aware of things in their environment. But when you're in the human's environment, whatever's there is kind of what's there. So he got a really clear picture of a juvenile sitting on the edge of this water trough with its feet in the water. And then of course there were tracks all over the place. So when our guy started, and he's a contractor in that region, so that's how he knew these people. He started looking at some of these river bottoms. Now, when you look at the river bottoms and the footprints, you might tell yourself, okay, that's just somebody that walked through the mud. Well, it's, the surface is crusted pretty hard, and then these tracks are in a good 2+ inches deep into the material, and Jason weighs around 200 pounds. He's a decent sized guy, and he shows his footprints on the material, and he barely makes a mark. So whatever made these footprints, all these footprints, is extremely heavy.
Yeah.
Say, this is Roz here. I wonder if we could go back to this engine laying in the road business. That strikes me as beyond odd.
Yeah. And it had only been minutes since we had gone down the road to make our delivery.
That's what I was curious about. And how does that happen?
And who does something like this at 1 a.m. in the morning or 12 minute, whatever time? It was late.
Yeah, and those engines are kind of heavy.
Oh, yeah. This thing had to be a couple of 1,000 pounds.
Yep. Did this fence, was this just a hurricane fence only, or did it have that circular concertina wire on top?
What I recall, now this is 50 years ago. I'm really dating myself.
I know.
Yeah, it was round concertina wire. But I mean, wire or no wire, it was a 7-foot tall cyclone fence.
Right. You can just about imagine a couple of kids out there huffing that thing over the fence.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of kids that did this playing jokes. I don't think so.
When I worked for Boeing, we had to go in and out of the weapon storage areas, and that's not an easy process. You just don't waltz in there, and so that's why I'm thinking that something had access here that wasn't easily authorized. So I'm just thinking.
Yeah, and why in hell is it running around a weapon storage area?
Right.
I mean, is this thing after intel? What is it doing?
Well, I'm wondering about this tricksters. Tom asked about that, and I haven't heard of that exactly, but I've heard similar types of stories. But elaborate on that if you want.
Oh, I got a good one for you. This is my last one. I'm still at Luke. We had seen this creature out in the desert. A couple of months goes by. I'm sitting on the desk, and like I said, I'm desk sergeant. So I'm sitting on the desk, and we have what's called a SAT team, Security Alert Team. These guys, their MOS is security, where ours was law enforcement. And these guys, what they do, they'll have a mobile unit with 3 guys aboard, all carrying M16s. Then they have the stationary guys like out the flight lines, and they're on foot. So the guys would come in every now and then for coffee, because we'd always have coffee going in operations there. So they come walking in, 3 of them, see the guys all the time, and they're milling. I'm looking at them. They're milling around the coffee table, and they got this just something really bizarre with the way they're acting and moving facially. The whole thing. Sitting there watching, I'm thinking they look like they've seen a friggin' ghost. So I called one of the guys over. I said, "What the hell's wrong with you guys?" And he thought for a second. He says, "Come on outside and I will tell you." So we walked outside, because I don't think he wanted anybody to hear this. Walked outside, and I'm actually surprised he told me. So he tells me that they were parked out. They were in a Dodge 6-pack. And this is a 4-door pickup truck.
Yeah.
3 in the front, 3 in the rear. They're parked out at the flight line, end of the flight line, right near the desert, open desert area. 2 are in the front. 1 guy's in the back. Passenger in the front is turned around talking to the guy in the rear. And he sees this thing out of the desert. It's running towards the vehicle on 2 legs. He's looking at this in disbelief. He tells the guy driving to start it up and get the hell out. He's screaming at him. And they said they all turned around, and this thing came running up at an angle to the truck, jumped over the rear of the bed of the truck, landed on their right, took a few steps, and was gone. So in the meantime, they're tearing out of there. He says, and this guy's in shock. Actually, all 3 of them, they were pretty much in shock. So that's the story he related to me. Pardon?
I say I could imagine. I encountered the security guys one time when I was in the Air Force. And I don't remember what was going on, but they come down the hall. I worked in an electronics lab. And these guys came down the hall looking for something or doing something. And one of them told me to get up against the wall. And I looked at him. I said, "You're kidding." He wasn't. They're not like are out just goofing off. Huh.
I wonder what that was all about.
I don't know. Whatever they were looking for, they did or didn't find it, and then away they went. And it was just poof, and they were gone.
Yeah.
But the look on his face and the end of that M16 indicated that he meant what he said.
Yeah.
So it's not like
they trained a little bit differently than we were.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It's not like they're going to be spooked easy. You wouldn't think.
Oh, these guys were spooked.
Yeah.
It was evident when they walked into operations they were spooked. It was just blaring. So what the hell do you think it was? We don't know. Well, are you going to make a report? Hell no.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I've been into Bigfoot ever since I was a kid. I read all the old, books by the, there weren't many then, back in the 60s, mid-60s. And, well, I'll tell you, I mean, like everyone else, I thought Bigfoot was in the Northwest. That was it.
Yep.
And I'm hearing these stories down here and seeing this stuff, and I'm thinking, this is like Bigfoot, but in the desert?
Right.
No friggin' way.
Well,
where do these things live? Where do they bed down in the desert?
What do they eat? Yeah. I read, first I read of them was in Outdoor Life magazine when I was about 10. As I figured, okay, they're just critters up in the forest. But the longer I look into this, I find stories of them being elsewhere. I was talking to a sergeant one day.
They're everywhere.
Yeah. I was talking to a sergeant one day who told me that he'd seen one cross the road as he was heading back to base from town. One foot on the shoulder, one in the center line, and one back on the shoulder, and it was gone again. This is at night.
Yeah, what base was this?
Minot Air Force Base when I was up there.
Oh, yeah. You're kidding. Yeah, wonderful.
I always wondered what I did to, whatever. That's how I ended. But again,
when we were getting orders in Japan and getting ready to come back to the States, we're all praying to God it wasn't going to be Minot.
Yeah.
We had one guy who got Minot. The poor guy was crying.
Well, it was a shock at first. But I discovered there are things to be seen, so it's more interesting than a long way from the ocean and the mountains and all that. But still, got those things up here. I was watching a news report here. It was in the newspaper, then it was on a Fargo TV station here several years ago. A tracker, guy's out trapping, came across prints in the wintertime, and he followed them for 7 miles up. I think it was a Cheyenne River Valley, maybe. So again, I assumed they were out in the Pacific Northwest only, and well, not so much.
Yeah, very strange. Well, they like the military installations for some reason. So it kind of makes you wonder, what are these things really all about, and what are they?
Right.
Who are they related to, Or who do they work for?
Ooh, now that's getting creepy.
Of course, they appear physical. They have to eat. You got scat. You got prints. But what really are they? Jacques Vallée, in his books, he came to the conclusion, the more he studied UFOs, the more he came to the conclusion that it's all related. That the area that UFOs and Bigfoot and ghosts all come from one and the same dimension.
Okay,
that's something that I've always wondered about that. It seems like I find UFOs fascinating and all that, but I can't go to an area. I can't research them. You can't predict where they're going to be. They're just, they're a phenomenon. And, apparently the DOD has come out within the last couple of years and said they exist. But Bigfoot is a whole different kettle of fish, so to speak. Will knows this. There's 2 areas here in Oregon that I can kind of predict when and where they're going to be with some regularity, not absolute, but with some regularity. I can go out and find these things, hear them. I've even witnessed them and been bombarded with the horrible smell. But I guess I know some people kind of make that connection. I just have a hard time with that. They just seem like they're part of the natural environment. I can't see one of these things sitting in a UFO and flying it, but yeah, I don't know. That's just my just my thoughts. Yeah, right there you go. Well, yeah, he does. He's in the movies, but they're a fascinating topic, and they've been around. Gosh, of course they predate not only the settlers coming in, but also the Native Americans said they were here when we got here.
Oh yeah. Well, wasn't it back in the 70s that the UFOs shut down like all those silos?
I haven't heard that one.
Oh yeah, Google it.
All right.
They had one or two hovering over the silos, and they shut everything down. The power, all the Minuteman silos were inoperational for I think about an hour.
It had to have been the Russians.
Yeah.
There were UFOs spotted right above one of the silos, sitting there hovering.
That's interesting. That's about the time that when I was hearing these stories, mid-70s.
Yeah.
Ross, I'm going to jump in real quick. You had some prints at a secure site, but anybody can just hop over the fence, right? It's not that difficult, correct, to just go in there and wander around and make some prints?
Sure, yeah. You're back onto this tall hurricane fence business, and guess what? There's radar or some kind of a security at every location.
Yeah, right. I was being very, very facetious.
I know you were. These things see rabbits when they go jumping, or birds.
Gotcha.
Well, they supposedly they have a crew down at Edwards Air Force Base whose job it is to keep these Bigfoot off the flight line down there when they have a prominent landing. Or a landing of something, like when they had the shuttle and they would land there, these guys would go out and ensure that the Bigfoot didn't come out and interrupt the landing.
Oh, now that's
a
great thing to see on CNN.
Dan, can you give us some extra details on that? I'm interested. Why? How did they know? What's going on?
Well, I've read this in several places, and I do know, and I heard word of mouth about Edwards. And, I don't have conclusive proof that, this is like hearsay, but there are supposedly families of Bigfoot living in that area around Edwards.
Okay.
One or two guys down at Edwards who told them, we got them on tape. Everybody knows all about them. We're told to leave them alone. And, we make sure when there's a landing of the space shuttle or something else that they don't come out on the runway.
No, that's interesting. Very
What do they chase them away with?
Pardon?
What do they use to chase them away?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay, I was just wondering.
I imagine just driving towards them would get them out of their area.
Okay.
So, I'm going to back up for a second. Yeah,
you ever been around Edwards? Edwards is pretty desolate out there. A Bigfoot family, what do they eat? Like Will said, what the hell could they eat out there?
Well, there's a lot of sand and dirt. Hey, let me back up for a second. So what's the deal with Minot? Why not Minot?
Huh. Reason's a reason?
Do you mean that we didn't want to get stationed there?
Right.
Oh, it had a reputation.
The weather. Cold. So we were in northern Japan where we froze our behinds off, and we didn't want to go to another frozen area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gets cold occasionally.
Yeah. I think all the military branches have their duty stations like that. I know in the Army when I was stationed in Germany, two of our favorite places were wild flicking and Grafenwehr. So I actually caught frostbite and wild flicking. So I can fully understand.
Well, worse than my knot was the fear of going to the Aleutians. You didn't want to go to the Aleutians. They have a base out there.
That would be cold.
Yeah.
A lot of humidity. Makes it really, yeah.
This might strike you as kind of interesting, but believe it or not, Minot actually had one time, I don't know if they're still out there, but not Minot, but North Dakota had a Coast Guard station out there. So I thought that must be a real promotion to have been stationed out there.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Now you have to wonder what the Coast Guard is doing in North Dakota.
They were operating an Omega station. There are 6 of these around the world. They've decommissioned them since. They were navigation. Tom and I drove out there one time.
Yeah, we did. In the middle of nowhere. It took hours to get out there. So, Dan, you see what you've been missing out on.
No, I love the desert. I like the heat. I don't like freezing my behind off.
It's not that bad.
Yeah.
This year, anyway.
Well, I was 19 before I saw my first snow. I looked pretty on TV. That was about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, I want to go back I just want to get a little more information on the for lack of a better word, the Bigfoots that were, and this was like a mothball area, correct?
Yeah, there's an acronym for it. I don't remember what it was, but yes, they have like 4,500. At least they did 4,500 or so aircraft and mothballs.
Okay, and I think they chose the desert because it's the low humidity, it's dry, you have low corrosion, and
exactly,
yeah, good storage for aviation. So, was this an ongoing thing? Had this been going on for some time? Where because you get a rotation, right? You're either your security or whatever your MOS mandates that you do, you're going to be there for a while. You're going to rotate out. How long did you get any sense that this Bigfoot activity had been seen out there?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I wasn't given, everybody, like you said, spend a little time there and then they're off to their next base. I have no idea. I would imagine it's been, it wasn't recent. It's probably pretty much ongoing.
Well, that's interesting. Well, the reason I asked is I just wondered if this is just a kind of a curiosity on my part, if possibly this is an area prior to the establishment of the Air Force, acquiring the land and turning it into again, mothball is not the right term, but that's kind of the civilian vernacular.
Right.
That maybe these creatures had historic precedence in the area.
Yeah.
And now they've got this, human presence there with technology, and maybe they're just, I don't know what their motivation would be, but it's just interesting. I just find that fascinating.
Well, that whole Tucson area is a strange area. It goes back 10,000 years.
As far as the Bigfoot goes?
Bigfoot and with these, what they call, the Indians talk of the little people, who actually, I know somebody who, when I was down there in Tucson, actually witnessed the little people. So there's a lot of things going on in the desert, the UFOs. If you're into this paranormal stuff, you're in heaven down there.
Right? Well, I think we had a famous radio talk show host that was down there, and he seemed to really enjoy it. Well, listen, I want to thank both of you. Dan, I really appreciate your coming on and sharing This very fascinating story. I can't imagine how. I think the engine or the nacelle or whatever it is ended up in the middle of the road in such a short period of time. Ross, thank you for coming on, and interesting stories as well.
You bet.
Dan, I'm going to send you some of those pictures from our guy Jason down there so you can get an idea what's going on currently.
Great, I would appreciate that.
You bet.
Thank you.
Fellas, we really appreciate...
Well, thanks for having us on.
Oh, our pleasure. Really appreciate both you coming on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning, @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.